In information technology, whenever we're working with data, files, or tech in general, we need some sort of way to get that data or information if it gets lost, damaged, or deleted. In that case, we use what's known as backups, which are copies of an original piece of data or files or something with technology that we can use to recover that data or information if it's lost or deleted. Because data is often more important than actual physical hardware, we need to make regular backups of important information and databases and data in order to ensure that we can access that information in case anything goes wrong. Now, one thing to know here is backups aren't just limited to larger businesses. Even if you have a smaller business or you just are using backups for your own personal reasons, it's highly advised that you become familiar with backups and you understand how they work. So for example, with a personal example, if you have family photos, you might want to take photos of the actual physical copy and put those on somewhere like Google Drive, Dropbox, or any other online cloud storage site. That way, if you ever lose those physical copies, you have digital copies. You can even take this a step further. Instead of just having those copies on one website, you could have them both on Google Drive and Dropbox, so two separate websites. Nowadays, many people choose to upload their backups to the cloud. In fact, nowadays, many smartphones use features where once a picture is taken, it gets saved to your local device or your smartphone SD card, and then also gets saved to the cloud. That way, if you lose your phone, you've got no worries. You can go online and look at all of your photos directly through something like the cloud. Let's talk about what we're going to be covering more in this video. We're going to be talking about backup methods and storage options for those backups. We're going to be talking about file and system backups, full incremental and differential backups, versioning, cloud backups, how we can test restores, and finally, we'll be wrapping up with local media or where we can actually store our backups on USB drives, SD cards, hard drives, and solid state drives. In terms of backups, you might commonly see file backups and system backups. File backups are pretty simple. They're just saving individual files, whether they're MP4 videos, PDF files, whether they're photos, text, any type of file that you have, you can have backups of those files. And backups of these are pretty simple. You can actually back them up directly through Windows if you're using a computer or a Windows laptop, and you can also use the cloud. So file backups, usually pretty simple. You can also do file backups on a local storage drive. So if you have a larger storage drive, you could put all of the files from your computer, your laptop, onto that larger storage drive. Same thing really with USB drives. They offer a very similar function to some of those external hard drives. System backups, on the other hand, create a full copy of a system, whether it's a computer, a laptop, or a server. And generally, it includes a lot. It includes the operating system, programs, and you might also be able to enable file saving as well, or file backups through a system backup. Not all the time can you do that, but sometimes different types of backup methods allow you to do that. Both file backups and system backups are important because they allow our data and our devices to be restored quickly after loss. So if you've ever had your laptop crash or something on your laptop break and you need to completely reinstall Windows, if you have what's known as an image or system backup, you can go ahead, boot up your laptop, load right from that image, and then everything should be fresh. Let's talk about file backup and system backups in this chart. So file backups, again, individual files. In terms of purpose, they also protect important personal or work files. For restore speed, they're usually much quicker for single files, but depending on the types of files and folders you have, these could take up quite a bit of space and require a little bit of time in order to restore things. But many people opt to take multiple files or multiple folders and then zip them and then put them on an external hard drive or USB. And usually that compresses the whole file size. So instead of it being 30 gigabytes of folders, you might be able to get down to 15 or 20 gigabytes, which does impact the restore speed and also how long it takes to transfer from your computer to your external device like a flash drive. So when do you use file backups? You use file backups simply when you need to recover specific files. If you have specific files that you want to make sure that you're keeping around and that they're not just on one device, this is what file backups are for. Again, you could use family images, you could use important things like video meetings that you recorded for, say, a very big business meeting. There's really a lot of use case with file backups, and for the most part, both consumers and businesses make use of file backups. Next up is system backups, and system backups generally back up the entire device. So operating system, program settings, and like I mentioned earlier, even potentially files. On Windows, we call this more of a system restore, and we call the actual backup, the backup file, we call that an image. So it's an image of the computer as it currently is. The purpose of a system backup, it's pretty simple. It's to restore the whole system in the event of a major failure, whether something crashed, an update or patch went wrong, or someone hacked into your computer. If you can restore from a previous image that you know is good, then you're good to go. One thing I wanted to clarify here, though, just because you have a system backup does not mean that backup is safe. So keep that in mind. If your computer ever gets hacked and you did a backup 2 days ago, when you might have had downloaded the virus and ran it, Well, you might have a virus on the old system backup. So that's why people say create backups, create them frequently. Usually, most people in tech circles will do system backups or system images once every 2, 3, or 4 weeks. That's usually the recommended amount. But if you do it, say, once every 2 or 3 months, you're going to lose out on a lot of data because you only have the information from your latest backup. And plus, you don't have as many to choose from if your computer was infected. System backup restore speed usually takes a long time, but it does restore almost everything that you need as long as you have the image built properly. When do you use a system backup? Again, when a system gets hacked, crashed, or needs some sort of full recovery. System backups really aren't as complex as they may seem. In fact, Windows offers a system restore tool where you can go through and you can make backups. So really not that crazy. Just understand these two are different concepts and how they apply to the Tech Plus exam. These are just files. These are full system backups. Now let's compare these different types of backups in this chart here. First, starting with full backups. Full backups save all selected files every single time. The backup speed is pretty slow, so when you're actually making the backup, it does take a while. Storage used is the most because, again, it's backing up the most files. Restore process, it's actually fairly easy to restore because you have so many different things located on the backup that it's not complex and you're not going to run into many errors because your system should know what to do with this. Next up is incremental backup, and this saves only files changed since the previous backup. Backup speed is the fastest because it uses the lowest amount of storage and has usually the lowest amount of files between these three. Incremental backups can be the hardest to restore just because you have to go through and check out your different files, and sometimes it can be a pain. Now, I understand why this may be confusing. You might think that full backups might be harder to restore more than incremental backups, but with full backups, generally our systems know what to do with those and our system can handle that. Sometimes incremental backups take a little bit more manual work. So this doesn't relate to how long this takes to restore. We're just talking about difficulty from a difficulty aspect here in the restore process. Finally, we have differential backups. These are files that have been changed since the last full backup. They're faster than full, slower than incremental. They use more storage than incremental because they're backing up more files. And lastly, the restore process is about moderate, in between full backup and incremental. And here's a diagram of our backups. So full backups are here. They're our initial complete backup that we've done. We also have incremental backups. These are changes since the last backup that we made. This isn't a full backup. It's essentially piggybacking off of a full backup and just adding any sort of changed files and updating them to the full backup. Next up is a differential backup. This is any changes that we've made since a full backup. Lastly is the restore. This is when we can use any three of these backups in order to restore, say, our files or our entire system on a device. Next is cloud backups, and we talked a little bit about how we can use USB drives, we could use external hard drives, we can use almost any data storage that can connect to our computer in order to back up files. Now, we can also use the cloud. The cloud allows us to have our different types of files and backups directly onto something like Google Drive so that we can recover them very easily if our computer breaks, gets lost, is damaged, or we're just not able to get to those files. One of the cool things about cloud backups is the odds of losing the files are much lower than losing a physical copy backup. For example, you could have a USB drive, and that's perfectly fine, and you could back up through that. But keep in mind, USB drives don't last forever. Many times people have had reports of USB drives going out in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's pretty common. So if you had all of your backups on a USB drive and it gets damaged, probably lost the data if that was your only backup. But if you have cloud backups, you can add a backup to Google Drive and to Dropbox and maybe to one other site really simply, really simple, really quickly. And then it's a lot less of a risk of you actually losing your login to those or not being able to find them. If you use cloud backups in general, even if you only use one, like just Google Drive, just having it on the cloud for the most part is going to ensure it's a lot more available than having it on something like a USB drive. One thing I wanted to talk about with cloud backups, though, is with cloud backups, you aren't really supposed to put sensitive information on there. So I wouldn't upload my social security number to the cloud. I wouldn't put important financial information in there just because if your account ever gets hacked or the platform ever gets breached that's holding your files, well, someone else might be able to see them. So make sure that you're not putting anything on a cloud backup that you wouldn't want or you wouldn't be comfortable with someone else being able to see if your account did get hacked. One thing that you can do though, and we're going outside of the scope of this course, but if you really, really wanted to use cloud backups for sensitive information, you could encrypt the files that you're going to upload, encrypt them, then upload them to the cloud. That way, if someone does get a hold of them, they don't have your encryption key, so they can't actually use your backups or get into the files. That's one way of doing it. And honestly, it's not a bad method as long as you're familiar with encryption and you can keep your encryption keys safe and handy. Next up is versioning, and this is more of a best practice. This is when we save multiple versions of a file over time so that we can restore from an earlier version if the file gets messed up, if data is changed, accidentally deleted, damaged, hacked, lost, whatever it is. Essentially, versions are like having multiple backups or copies of a file so that we can then choose to restore from and when. It's sort of like having multiple video game saves. So I don't know, you might not game nowadays, but if you were gaming when you were younger, you would always go and save. That way, if anything bad happened, you couldn't beat the boss and you lost all your items, you could go back and load that previous save. That's kind of what versioning is. And versioning is important because it protects against mistakes, helps recover from attacks, and it overall improves data safety and reliability because we can access and recover things when needed. And here is a real world use case for versioning. This is in Google Docs, and Google Docs automatically enables version history or versioning. In this case, you can see we have a bunch of different changes made to this file, and we have changes made from multiple people across multiple days. Now, this is a simple job process aid. It's kind of like an SOP. And what we did here was we edited it day by day. So you could see here, we can restore from almost any version. I could restore from this one from 6:03 p.m., from 5:41 p.m., or we could go all the way to November 26th and restore from that. These are all the versions, and these are very, very useful overall for making sure that we have access to our files and the older versions in case something goes wrong. Additionally, here's an example of cloud backups versus local backups. As you can see, our data moves from our machine to the cloud, and on this one, for local backups, our information moves from the device to our computer or from our computer to the device. So we can either one, you could download or upload. These arrows are just there, just showing you the purpose of this. Again, you can download here or upload, and you can download and upload as well. But you can start to see the differences. Essentially, our local backups are on a physical local device. Our cloud backups are right on the cloud. So what happens if something goes really, really wrong with our device, but we have a backup? If we don't know how to use that backup, it's useless. So what we need to do is we need to test our restores. Testing restores or testing backups means that we're checking our backups are actually functional and actually working by restoring files and making sure that they open correctly. This helps ensure that our data can be recovered when we actually need it. You should do these every so often. You don't need to do them every time you do a backup, but maybe 3 to 4 times a year. It's useful for you to do this if you have some sort of system restore image or backup that's crucial, because you'll be able to much more easily restore from backup if something bad actually happens. Here you can see on the Windows boot menu, we have system restore, and this is where we would actually go through and test out our restore. Or if something actually went wrong, we could go in here on a Windows device and then restore from the image or the backup. Now, keep in mind, if you restore an image, it is possible that it can wipe what you currently have. So testing restores, the best thing to really do is test them on an old device. And for the most part, testing system restores, you probably won't do very often. More likely, you'll do testing file restores and things like that, because system restores, while they're not difficult, they can take quite a bit of time. And I don't want you to do this unless you have another device you're fine with wiping, because if you do run a system restore, it's going to restore everything from that restore up until that point. Next up is local media. We've went over these in previous sections. Essentially, these are physical storage devices mainly used for backing up data locally or for storing local data. USB flash drives, small portable devices that plug into our USB ports, secure digital or SD cards. We use them in cameras, phones, things like that. We can connect them to the computer to swap files and transfer files. And then we have hard disk drives as well as solid state drives, which provide a lot of storage capacity for a large amount of data. One thing to note, for the most part, USB flash drives and SD cards don't normally have that much storage. So you're not going to be able to do a full system restore backup on a USB flash drive. For anything bigger, you're going to use a hard disk drive or a solid state drive. And overall, that's all about backups. We talked about everything related to backups, including the different types of backups, what versioning is, cloud versus local storage, local media, and more. Make sure that you understand each of these concepts, as well as backups in general to cloud, into on-premises devices, or to local devices for the Tech Plus exam.